Sure, sir. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 20th webinar on various subjects that we have covered. Today, we have a very interesting subject. So we have almost 250 registration. When compared to other subjects, we have very low registration. I'm also wondering why, very low turnout for this webinar. Maybe we are talking about disability. Probably people would have thought not for us. It is different. So every day I was changing the design of the invitation and the content of it to see whether how many architects can come forward, how many consultants can come in. So, but we are successfully registered 250, and I'm sure over the period next 10 minutes, we will cross over 50 to 75 attendees for this today's webinar. About me, myself, so I've been actively involved in the fire and security industry over 33 years. And my passion is bringing people learning, earning, and sharing. So there's a three principles which I follow. So sharing is something, knowledge sharing is something that I'm now trying very hard to make sure that every citizen of this country is aware of safety standards and codes. So we've been continuously doing this webinar, and we reached out to as many as 6,500 people in the last 4 months on various subjects. And today, the subject and the objective of the webinar is very clear. If you look at it, the UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability was adopted during 61st session of the UN Assembly on December 13, 2006, and came into force in May 3rd, 2008. The objective of the convention was to promote, protect, and ensure the enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedom by persons with disability, and to promote respect their inherent dignity. In implementation of its obligation under the convention, India enacted the Rights of Persons with Disability Act in 2016 and the rule thereunder 2017. The new act required establishment to prepare and publish an equal opportunity policy for persons with disabilities. If you look at ISO standard 21542, the accessibility and usability of the built environment in building construction, very clearly defined, very elaborately discussed. This international standard sets out the objective, design consideration, requirements, and recommendation that ISO expect to result in accessible and usable building when fully implemented. This international standard should be applied to new and existing building. So we have two eminent and our keynote speaker, Mr. Suresh, who are committed to make sure that every building in the country are accessible to mobility impaired people. And if you look at any building that you enter, always there is a big signage near the lift. Do not use the elevator in case of fire. Use the stairwell to evacuate. This is fine for the people who are physically fit. But what about the disability people? Have you ever thought how the senior citizen or people are mobility, how will they evacuate? From the safety, as a safety practitioner, I always look at whether it is a car park, whether it is the entry into the complex, how easy for the wheelchair person to access to the building. I always find India is still not friendly to disabled people. And I find this signage, but what happens? Do we have, people are aware what are the method to evacuate people? So this is something that I'm sure the speaker will touch upon as they progress. And today's topic is accessibility standard for person with disability. Harmonized, there are two guidelines that two standards that India has, harmonized guidelines by urban development and NBC National Building Code Part 3, Section 13 and Annexure B. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's speaker is, Ramachari, who is specialized in cross disability the specialist, and we have Ruchira Sarin, who is a universal design architect. And today's keynote speaker, none other than Mr. V. Suresh, the Vice Chairman of National Building Code. Mr. V. Suresh is a civil engineer from Anna University with over 55 years of professional experience in the housing, infrastructure, rural and urban development, and built environment sectors. He worked in Tamil Nadu Public Works Department for 1.5 years and thereon in Bureau of Indian Standard for 12.5 years. And he was directly associated with formulation of leading national standards and codes for the National Building Code. So he is there from the inception of National Building Code. And he is now the Vice Chairman of National Building Code Sectional Committee and Chairman for Housing, Planning and Prefabricated Construction Sectional Committee of BAS. He is also the former Chairman and Managing Director of Housing and Urban Development Corporation, and is the current Chairman of the Indian Green Building Council and Vice Chairman of NBC. So with regard to recognition and award, he has more than 25 to 30 awards. I just listed very few to. He's the best Chief Executive of the Year by the National Foundation of India. And IMM Millennium Top CEO Award for Excellence. Man of the Decade Habitat, International Award for Visitex Foundation 2000. And Griha Nirman Maharshi Award, instituted by Pune Construction Engineering Research Foundation and Builder Association of India. And Outstanding Contribution to Real Estate Development Award by CWI in 2013. And about our speaker, Rama Krishnamachari, Director of DIOC. The Rama Krishnamachari has more than 2 decades of work experience in the field of disability, inclusion and equality. She is specialized in the area of disability policy and has undertaken several studies on the UN Convention on Rights of the Person with Disability and its application in various aspects. She has developed the disability inclusion framework for environment in the corporate sector, which has been recognized nationally and internationally. She has been working on accessibility since 2001 and was part of the campaign that was undertaken by NCP-EDP during the visit of Stephen Hawking to India. The campaign was then extended to audit several public buildings in Delhi. It led to several policy changes with regard to accessibility in built environment. She has worked consistently on the issue, which has led to accessibility work being done in a professional manner. She has done Masters in Economics, PG Diploma in Education of Children with Disabilities. Rama was selected for the prestigious International Visitors Leadership Program, IVLP, which is the US Department of State's Premier Professional Exchange Program in 2002. Ramachari, I'm very fortunate to attend a couple of workshops of Rama Krishnamachari. She's very passionate on the subject, and I'm sure those who are attending today very fortunate to hear from Rama Krishnamachari. And we have the architect, the principal architect, Ruchira Sarin. Ruchira Sarin is an architect with 16.5 years of experience in design and softwares. A gold medalist in Malviya National Institute of Technology, Jaipur. Ruchira has been associated with more than 5 renowned architectural and IT organizations in India. She has been associated with diverse consultancy projects ranging from residential, cultural, institutional, hospitality, and commercial for Indian as well overseas clients. She is a member of Council of Architects of India. She specializes in universal design and leads the accessibility initiative of DIOS, a social enterprises. In the capacity, she has been associated with several prestigious organizations advising on barrier-free built environment. Very interesting, barrier-free built environment. She is a regular visiting faculty at Sushant School of Design, Gurgaon, and has delivered lectures on universal design in several other institutions. As part of DIOC team, she has been involved in extensive study of National Building Code and other accessibility standards to advise government bodies. A part of this, Ruchira is the principal architect and founder of two design organizations. How do you read this? ODE2 Design and ODE2 Greens. Ladies and gentlemen, I now welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. V. Suresh, to give his opening remarks. Over to Mr. V. Suresh.
Thank you. Thank you, Dominic, and a special welcome to Ruchira Saran and Rama Krishnamachari, two outstanding people who are going to speak on the topic on part 3 of the National Building Code and section 13 and the appendix B information that we have got the complete provision done for all issues connected with the accessibility aspects for the elderly and also differently abled people of all nature. And this is a very important development that came over, and I'm very happy that they are both available here. And Dominic, I got to really place on record my appreciation for selecting a topic which has not been taken up so far in larger discussion forum. We have any number of webinars and seminars which are covered on other aspects of the National Building Code. And this is a topic which has got phenomenal amount of importance there and significance, and all concerned dealing with the planning design of building and more so public buildings has got to necessarily take this as part of the passive design of the building and also other related requirements in your, not only in the spaces and the built environment one, the access requirement from outside, as well as all the other control mechanisms that's required, so that you have barrier-free access coming over for the differently abled people and the elderly people in a very large way. Very rarely covered in most of the building regulations, because at the end of the day, all these are supposed to be covered in the building rules and regulations of a municipal corporation or municipalities, where based on which the building plans are submitted by the builders and developers and architects and engineers for approval. If you don't have the provisions available in these regulatory documents, that means whatever we are discussing now in the next about 1.5 hours time period, those provisions which are there in the part 3 of the National Building Code has got to find a place in the building regulation in a very large way. Then you get the compliance coming, without which you can't get a building plan approval. Some of them are good. Some of those forward-looking cities, they are ensured that Part 3 has become a part of their regulatory framework, and therefore they're able to ensure that these will be complied with. But not so in large number of other municipal corporations and municipalities. The building regulations and development control rules, these are still not part of that. And I feel it's very bad, because this is also the component which has been introduced in the NBC, the 4th version, in a very large way. Because as you know, the building code came in 70, then the 83 version, 2005 version, 2016 version. By the time the rights for persons with disabilities, 2016, the parliamentary regulation already, amendment already came, and therefore once that particular provisions are available through a statute, it's absolutely essential that the rules are framed to deal with this particular aspect. And it's at that particular point of time that the NBC 2016 version was getting firmed up, and we spent substantial amount of time to discuss in detail all the provisions that are there, and we given a very, very comprehensive provision. As a vice chairman of the NBC and the chairman for part 2 and part 3 dealing with this particular document, I'm aware of the phenomenal amount of involvement of all concerned stakeholders to deal with this in line with the international norm. You rightly mentioned about the ISO document 21542 and other related regulatory framework dealing with this particular aspect. And therefore, when we finalize this particular document in detail, we ensure that our provisions which are there are 118 pages of documentation available on this particular aspect. And I'm very happy that the provisions have been covered in detail, covering all phases, not only from outside of the building and coming into the building and the spaces which are around that, including all the provisions required for the parking and related one. And then once you get into the particular building, all the access requirements and the floor treatment and all the flow treatment and the related one. And these particular things have been covered in a very minute detailed form there. And I'm very happy that the planning detail covers for all categories of people, not only people with various disabilities, and whether it is going to be into the access, the type of ramps that is required, or the handrails and related one, or on the lift installations and other related components. How do we get all those details to be incorporated? These are, I'm sure, Rama and Ruchira will cover that in detail. Therefore, I'm intentionally not covering any of those phases, having worked on each of the clause in minute detail. But very important is that the movement and the accessibility on that. If you see, even in the part 4 of the National Building Code, you have the travel distance and the occupant load coming for the building, and we are trying to see that in the case of people with disabilities, their ability to move is not the same as one which are very active people like you have in a big office or whatever. So therefore, it's very necessary that we got to take into account those sensitive needs in a proper way and design for that. And for that, the norms are available, be the width of the corridor, the slope of the ramp, or the surface treatment to be done, or the handrails to be done, and the issues related to those who are blind and other who have got problems of the visibility issues there, what type of features to be incorporated in the building. These are all covered in a very, very minute, comprehensive manner. Some of the states and Urban Development Department and Local Self-Government Department have amended their building regulation post 2016 version of the NBC, and they made part 3 as part of this particular document. I'm very happy that these are all now incorporated now in some of the rules there, but this should be made as a compulsory area of work for any person, any builder or a developer or a government department or agency or the concerned architects or engineers dealing with the project. They can't get a building permit. They should not get a building permit unless these provisions are incorporated in the same. So we have to see how best we can take it forward in implementation phase. I'm sure this is applicable to all the public buildings where people are going to congregate in a very large way, and including, needless to say, the healthcare buildings are very important, where a large number of people their movements are restricted because of the physical conditions there. Then other disabilities coming in the office space, another one, including the physical toilets required or the parking requirements or other details that are identified in the building code. All the 118 pages are very detailed, comprehensive, and it's also done with a lot of, as you said, the ergonomics and the details will also give the type of design features incorporated in the same as well. So what I'll do is I'll stop at this particular point of time, and then I would request Rama and Ruchira to open out and make the detailed presentation, which I'm sure is going to be a very comprehensive one, covering each one of the features. And they can also indicate, I would request them to also indicate what are the roadblocks which are coming in the implementation of that. I indicated some of them. How many of the architectural profession people are aware, full aware? How many of the professionals, architects and engineers are fully aware? How many of the regulatory body people are fully aware of this particular one? So you require a massive dissemination also to be done of these provisions. And because duty bound, as per the parliamentary legislative provisions of the rights that we have for the people with disability 2016 Act there, you have to necessarily take care of the implementation of the same in a large way. I'm looking forward to the presentation of both Rama Krishnamachari as well as Ruchiraji, both of them. And I'm sure then later on we can have the good interaction coming towards the end of the presentation on that. So with that, I close my opening remarks. Dominic, you can kindly request Ramaji and Ruchiraji to make the presentation one after the other.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Well said, and that's a wonderful opening remark by you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Mr. V. Suresh. You'll be here to take up question answer at the end. I'm sure. Kindly be patient and please be there till the end because this is a very rare topic that we cover in India, and I'm sure your participation itself is a motivation to us, and you will be there to hear the question and answer. So before I hand over the stage to Rama, I would like to run a 4 questionnaire to you. I wanted to understand how much you are aware of this. So just for a minute, if you can just say yes, no to this 4 points that is there, yeah, I would appreciate. So the time start now. Please answer to these questions. I request everyone to just give your comment on this. The polling is on, and you will get answer over the next 20 to 30 minutes to all these questions that has been posted here. So we will close this polling. Hope, Rama, you have made a note of this. So I'll end the polling here. And this is the result. And I'm going to close this. And now over to Rama. I'm going to stop my sharing and you can take over, Rama. Rama, are you there?
Yeah, I was on mute.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the presentation as well?
Yes.
Okay. First, thank you so much, Dominic, for organizing this very important webinar. And thank you so much for Mr. V. Suresh to have made a very, very comprehensive introduction to the whole topic. And thank you, NBC, for really, I can see from his talk how knowledgeable is he about the disability issue. Very rarely you get people who are engineers and architects who are aware. And because NBC has taken up, he not only understands the act, he was talking about the various provisions. And that is very visible in the way National Building Code has been, we're very open to the suggestions that we made. What I will be doing in my presentation is, talking about the legislation, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act and the provisions. And my colleague Ruchira will talk about the National Building Code and the provisions, how it can be implemented, and also the challenges that, Mr. Suresh asked us to highlight. Talking of the Act, there was an earlier Act of 1995, and of course, the UN Convention was ratified in 2007, and the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act in 2016. The paradigm shift between the 1995 and 2016 is this. Earlier thinking was that we said that person had a problem. We said person cannot read because he or she is blind. We said person cannot travel because he or she cannot walk. We said person cannot communicate because he is deaf. We put the problem in the person and we said the person is abnormal, and we assume the society to be so-called unchanging or quote unquote normal. So the whole approach to work with disability was very charitable in approach. Even the government had very charitable approach. It would either give pension for people with disabilities or grants to an NGOs. And then there was a time when around the 50s, where there was a lot of focus on, curing the person or therapy to the person to fit into the society. A lot of associations for the blind, associations for the deaf, spastic societies, very much required. Of course, they gave therapy, education, and I'm part of that era. I'm a special educator, worked for many years in spastic societies. We would try and integrate person into the society, and those who could fit in could fit in. Even the schools at the time would say, okay, we can give you admission, but we will not do any other changes. Or the child can come and just write the exam, but they will never change their infrastructure. A maximum bring the classroom to the ground floor, but every other labs, libraries would be on higher floors, or the child will not participate in the playground, etc. So society remained unchanged. The paradigm shift that I spoke about, this act has brought about, is that now a person with disability is a person with equal rights. Equal right to education, employment, going anywhere they like, getting married, having children, owning property. All rights that are available as a human being, as a citizen, is available to persons with disability. Now the problem is defined as problem lies in the society. Today we say a person cannot read, not because he's blind. We do not have books in braille on accessible format. Today we say a person cannot travel, not because he uses a wheelchair. We do not have accessible transport or buildings. So very clearly now we define the problem being in the person, in the society. When you say a problem in the society, the kind of interventions that we would do is to break those barriers that exist in the society and ensure that the society becomes inclusive. One other thing that I want to clarify is that many people are very hesitant about the term disability. People think that disability is a negative term because of this DIS, disability. I want to say that the opposite of ability is actually inability. The disability word comes from the fact is that this has been debated by people with disabilities nationally and internationally. A person with disability says that, for example, this person on a wheelchair, he is disabled because of the steps there is. If there were no steps, then they would not be disabled. So disability word puts the problem outside the person in the society. It's a social model terminology where the society has a problem and a person is disabled by the environment and the attitude. Therefore, the disability term is the closest term that comes to experiences of people with disabilities. Therefore, and person is very important because sometimes we tend to use words like autistic, dyslexic, as if the whole individual is. Disability is just one aspect of that person. Therefore, person with disability is the right terminology to use. Again, many people think that making a building accessible is for providing ramps or toilets. But let me tell you, accessibility of built environment affects people with different disabilities. There are, 21 categories of disabilities have been listed in the Act itself. I'll give you an example: dwarfism, person who's short-statured. 2 levels of handrail, for example. It actually takes into account dwarfism and also children, children who may be doing. There is also acid attack victims. There are people with hemophilia, thalassemia who may feel extreme fatigue and may need certain support in the built environment like seating spaces, etc. People with autism, for example, the noise, the lighting, all that affects a person with autism. People with psychosocial disabilities, people with intellectual disabilities. Earlier, construction used to be like a maze. You get lost. So very simple construction, or even easy to access emergency information, all that needs to be taken into account, because a lot of people with intellectual disabilities earlier were just sitting at home, are now working in hotels, hospitals, workplaces, everywhere. So when it comes to deafness, for example, if there is a emergency alarm, it's just a hooter. Person sitting in a hotel room may not even be aware that there is an emergency. So these are all some of the things that affects, accessibility of built environment. When it comes to accessibility, it is not just built environment, services, information communication technology, transportation, even products have accessibility. For example, the microwave or the washing machine. Can it be operated by somebody with vision disability? So all these will have to be accessible as per the law. And earlier 1995 Act did not really put private sector was not covered. Now this 2016 Act very clearly says the private establishment is covered. Factory is also covered. Every agency is covered. So everyone is covered under the Act. And it says that no person should be discriminated on the ground of disability, which means that earlier companies could say, oh, you're qualified, but sorry, we can't hire you because our building is not accessible, or we do not know how to integrate a child with disability. You cannot say anything like that. You cannot refuse a person, or you cannot discriminate a person just because of the disability. Also, another interesting term when non-discrimination comes, it is not just direct discrimination, it is also indirect discrimination. Tomorrow, if they have an interview on the 3rd floor, a person cannot reach, then that is also considered as discrimination. This is one interesting example where you have two pictures. If you see the first one, there is a soccer or some match happening, and there are 3 stools of the same size. Here, everyone is being treated the same. So the tall person is actually having a great time, and the short person can't see, maybe through the gaps you can see. And that is where it is. If you really see the second picture, this is the adjustment or the accommodation. The word is accommodation. Sometimes people think that it is the 2 BHK, 3 BHK. Accommodation in the disability law is the adjustment that you have to do for individualized. For example, somebody who's medium height is given 1 stool, and short stature person is being given 2 stool. This is not a preferential treatment. This is what promotes equality, and these accommodations are to be done. The law requires that you have to make these accommodation. Is there a better picture? Yes. If you see the third picture now, the systemic barrier has been replaced by a net. Now, no one needs any accommodation. Everybody can see it. This is called universal design. Universal design actually takes into account the needs of different people at the planning stage itself, so that you don't have to differentiate people, and it actually caters to every user. I spoke about accessibility. Many people think that, again, disability, locomotor disability means just somebody on a wheelchair. There is a range here. Somebody just limping to somebody on stretchers. And also some people I have seen saying that we sat on the wheelchair and tested out that, the reach to the control is easy. But such things should not really happen. Or we invited a person on a wheelchair to test out if our building is accessible. No, it is accessible for that particular wheelchair user. That is why standards are very crucial, because standards have taken into account the wide range that exists. For example, if they say 900 mm is the width of the doorway, it is not just one wheelchair, but multiple wheelchairs. People having 2 crutches may need that space allowance. So it takes into account the entire range. So I would say you have to go with the standards. We'll talk more about the standards. Again, the range. Here, people with difficulty using hands need certain support in terms of the door opening force, so on and so forth, the handle of the door, how to operate a tap, so on and so forth. Some of these are the pictures. Dominic mentioned about dignity. I think accessibility provides for the dignity of the person. Even in, I remember in, when there is a fire or there is a flood, people with disabilities are evacuated in a manner that it is not at all dignified. Whereas there are ways of with dignity, you can help people with disabilities. You can make your buildings accessible. These are some pictures. Blind people. Sometimes, again, when it comes to blindness, there is a wide range. Somebody can see bigger font, to somebody who can see good contrast, to somebody who has tunnel vision, to somebody who has, vision in the periphery, or somebody who is completely blind. And there is, again, the range. Some people may use a guide dog, somebody use a cane, somebody may just use a GPS. And the kind of problems that people face when they go to airports or for crossing roads. Metro has these tactile indicators that help in navigating for people with, vision disabilities. Crossing the road, some of these things are very useful in crossing the road. Signals which are accessible, braille, sign language, counters having sign language interpretation for people who are deaf. Signages, I spoke about the visual strobe light. So the law requires that you need to have all your buildings. You will not get a permission to build if you do not adhere to the standards. You will not get a certificate of completion. The law says that you need to ensure accessibility of existing building within 5 years' time. 5 years started from 2017, the rule was notified. So June 2022, that is the deadline for all the existing buildings to become accessible. That's a deadline that one need to work with. You cannot think, oh, we have time till 2022. You need to start your work now so that you can complete the work by 2022. Services, for example, banking services, transportation services, e-commerce, all that will have to be accessible for people with disabilities. These are the standards that are available today: harmonized guidelines, National Building Code, ISO. These are the standards for the websites, GIGW. And there are state commissioners, chief commissioners, there are special courts for disabilities. All these are implementation for the act. And there are, we say that this act has teeth because this has penalties for non-compliance or violation. With that, I will end my presentation. Ruchira will now talk about the National Building Code in detail, and then we will take the questions later. Thank you. Ruchira, over to you.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you so much, Dominic, the team at Blue and Grey, Nisha, for organizing this webinar on this very, very important subject of accessibility. And I take this opportunity to thank Mr. V. Suresh and also congratulate him for making the National Building Code, the latest version, the 2016 inclusive and, all inclusive, I would say, for accessibility. In fact, it is at par, and I totally agree, it is at par with the international standards that Mr. V. Suresh mentioned this morning. I also thank all the participants who took the initiative to join this conversation this morning, on weekend morning, to understand about accessibility, and just reflects how serious people from construction industry and people are towards this subject of accessibility. I will now share my screen and take over from where Rama left and speak about standards. So we just heard from Rama what the law has, the Rights of Persons with Disability Act. As far as built environment is concerned, we heard from Rama that there are 21 disabilities and each disability has a range. So, not all mobility impaired are on wheelchairs. Some may be walking with crutches, some may be walking with sticks, some may be limping. So there is a range in each kind of disability, and the government has given us a 5-year time frame. So the clock is ticking until June 2022 is the deadline where we have to have existing buildings retrofitted in compliance with the guidelines that the government has laid. So how do we achieve accessibility? It may baffle some of us that how do we cater to these 21 disabilities and range within the disability, also meet the time frame that has been specified in the law. The answer lies in the standards. So the key is universal design and by complying to standards. So we will strictly abide by standards. Universal design, Rama has already spoken about that regardless of person's ability or disability or their gender or size, their condition, if we design and inherently the design is done, keeping in mind these standards, then chances are that we will cater to 95% population and their requirements. So that is what accessibility does. And we like to call it universal design because it's like accessibility is just one subset of universal design. And there are examples that one could look at, like we have these sliding doors, which are automatic sliding in a building. They are a perfect example where universal design has been applied because it gives equality to all users, whether they are on wheelchairs or they are strolling a cart or a shopping cart or a pram or a suitcase. Everyone benefits because they do not. And now, in current COVID times, you do not even touch. So it's no touch, and you try and avoid contact with surfaces. So their automatic door to a building is a perfect example of universal design. So talking about accessibility standards, Rama has already touched on this in the previous slide, so I will skip through it. There are three standards that we look at. One is the National Building Code, Part 3, which is what we will discuss in the next few minutes. Then there is harmonized guidelines, which is laid by the Ministry of Urban Development. And then there are ISO standards, ISO 21542, 2011. So these are the accessibility standards. So very interesting poll that we had this morning, where there was one question regarding, how many of the participants feel that accessibility is there in which part of NBC, and about 60% participants believed that part 3 of NBC has something to do with accessibility. Yes, largely you are correct, but I would say part 0 to 12, all these parts now have something to do with accessibility, even part 0. So the answer would be every part of NBC has something to do with accessibility. That is interesting. So just to show part 0, which is the part that talks about integrated approach. And there is a section which says that there have to be periodic accessibility audits to ensure that buildings remain universally accessible and barrier-free for persons with disabilities. And then there is one section which talks about teamwork. So any project, when it is built, there is a list of consultants or professionals who come together to design and deliver that project, starting with architects, civil engineers, structural engineers, lift experts, fire engineers, health and safety specialists. So now if you see on the screen, the 21st professionals are accessibility and universal design specialists. So these are also, specialists who are only into specialized into accessibility and universal design are also part of the team now that has been laid by the National Building Code. In fact, the part 12 of NBC, where there is a section on facilities management, there also accessibility has got a mention. You will be surprised that one would think that what would accessibility be there, whether accessibility would be there in a part which is for HVAC, but a simple thing like mounting the remotes for split air conditioners, there is a range and there is anthropometrics there also. And now accessibility standards talk about that as well. So accessibility is there in each and every chapter of the new National Building Code. Talking about standards, they cover following areas. I am now focused only on part 3, annexure B, which is what we refer. It's a more than 100-page document, while the entire NBC is more than 1,300 pages. These are hardcore, accessibility guidelines, and they start with guidelines for gates, pathways, parking, drop-off areas and building entry, reception, the level differences, vertical movement within the building, like lifts and staircases, tables, counters, seating. So these are the interior spaces, toilets, canteen and pantry areas, all the miscellaneous spaces like medical rooms, resting rooms, recreation, signage, doors and glazings, and emergency related. So if you look at these are very comprehensive. Like Mr. Suresh this morning mentioned that they don't, it's like all encompassing now. It's cross-cutting from exteriors of a built environment to also interior spaces to services. Everything is now covered as part of these standards. So while the topic is very vast, and these few minutes would not do justice to looking at each and every detail, I will just share a few snapshots of what the part 3 annexure B entails, beginning with anthropometrics. So the standards give us guidelines as to what is the reach. What you see here is a wheelchair which has a maximum reach, lower, the minimum reach from a wheelchair, and that is, from how a wheelchair user approaches a space, whether it's a forward reach or a side reach, what kind of knee clearance is required underneath a table or a counter. So all that is mentioned in the anthropometrics section of this code. And we, like Rama was mentioning this morning, that we've come across instances where people said that we sat on a wheelchair. But no, now the good thing with the standards is that it's not left to anyone's imagination. It is now clear cut that when a switchboard has to be mounted, maximum height has to be 1200 mm and the lowermost height is 400 mm, as you can see in this figure 19 that is there on my slide right now, which shows clearly what is the range within which wheelchair users will be comfortable reaching. So it is not governed by an individual's choice. It is not left to somebody's or a designer's imagination that this is appropriate. Now we have standards which have everything written in black and white. Talking about pathways. So when we talk about the external environment, pedestrian walkway becomes very, very crucial, which is what is used by people with disabilities or regular pedestrians. So there is a stipulated width which starts from 1000 mm to 1800 mm, depending on whether it's a one-way walkway or a two-way walkway. And if it is a one-way walkway and if one has space constraint there, then how do we cater to wheelchair users where a space is provided for wheelchair users to turn? So a passing space is then provided. So standards go as deep as that every 25 to 30 meter where the walkway width is narrow, one would provide a passing space where a wheelchair, if required to turn, can turn and move behind. And then there is also a dimension to it, which is governed by the turning radius of a wheelchair. So that about the width of walkways. The other important aspect when we design pathways is doing these tactile indicators. We saw them in Rama's presentation, the yellow color tiles which are seen extensively in the metros and the airports and some public buildings now. So there are just two varieties. One is a dot variety, which is a warning block. And then there is another variety, which is called a guide block. So a combination of these two is done. So wherever there is a level difference, you warn a user using these warning blocks, and they are installed at steps, at staircases, at landings of ramps. They are also there to indicate a change in direction. So level changes and change in direction are indicated by using these warning blocks. And wherever you need a person to go or move in a particular direction, one would look at installing the guide blocks. So just these two, combination of these two tiles. But what is important here is that standards are also giving us a direction as to where they have to be used and how they have to be installed. They are not like a designer tile which could be left to a contractor or a architect to use the way they like and create a pattern out of it. There's a reasoning behind it, which is also coming forward in the codes now. Talking about accessibility in parking spaces, very, very important. You may have a very plush building with a good walkway around it, totally accessible. But if a person can't park their vehicle, then the whole exercise goes waste. So accessibility also covers parking where the standards talk about the number of car parking bays, which are governed by what is the total number of parking. So if there is 200 parking lot which is available in a building, then you need to have minimum six parking slots reserved for people with disabilities. And this parking is also designed, it's not just like an ordinary parking space, which is a standard 24 by 4800 grid. It will need to have a transfer space where a person who's on wheelchair can park their vehicle, transfer, and then move to their respective zone within the building. It needs to be identified with a signage, not just a pole signage, but a signage on the floor, which will say that this is reserved car parking for people with disabilities. Directional signage, the minute you enter a premise or a campus, you need to have these directional signages leading users to these accessible parking slots. And all the dimensions are now part of the standards. So as you can see, there is an international symbol of accessibility, which we call as ISA, which is done on the floor. Then there is a pole signage with ISA. Then there is a transfer bay next to the car parking lot for the parking which is reserved for people with disabilities. So standards go as deep as giving us what would be the color combination of this crosshatch, what would be the size of this international symbol of accessibility, what would be the stroke, what would be the height where we'll install the pole signage. So every detail is now available with us in the standards. A very simple example I'd like to touch upon is doors. So talking about accessibility, a lot of times we look at accessibility as building ramps and washrooms, but even things like doors have a whole lot of standards to be adhered to, starting from the door width, which has to be minimum 900 mm. Because again, it takes into account not just wheelchair users, people on crutches as well. And this is clear 900 mm width. So even if you have a double leaf door, the standards say that the single active leaf of the door should have minimum 900 mm clearance for a person to walk in and move freely. Then standards also talk about the force. So the force to open a door, these days there are these glass doors which are very prominent in commercial buildings, in office spaces. So these clearless glass doors have floor springs and sometimes they have door closures, but these fancy looking doors do not take into account the force required to open, which is also mentioned in the codes that it should not exceed 20 newtons. What is the profile of handles that we look at? If it's a glass door, then it has to have a manifestation, because among the disabilities, there are people with vision impairment who may not discern the presence of a glass door or a glazing unless it is clearly identified using these high contrast manifestation strips. And these have to be installed at 3 levels as per the codes: eye level of a seated person and a eye level of a standing person. seating spaces. So when we talk about walkways, when we talk about building interiors, there are seating spaces which are required for long walkways. If there are some reception spaces or waiting areas, again, one requires seating. Like Rama mentioned, that among 21 disabilities, there are a user group who may get tired very soon and who may require that kind of support. And when we design seating spaces, a lot of times we've seen in buildings that very fancy benches are kept. They are without a back, they are without an arm, or they may be with a back, they are without a armrest then. So the standards are giving each and every dimension here, as you can see now on my screen, starting from the height of the seating itself to what should be the armrest like. And armrest is a must, at least one armrest, so that a person can easily sit and get up from the seating. And then the back support or the backrest, and at what degree or at what angle should this backrest incline. Each and every detail is now mentioned in the standards. So not getting into each and every area of the codes, I am now going to get to where we go wrong with existing buildings. And you may find it interesting, like people very proudly say that we have ramps and we are accessible, but these are examples of ramps which are badly done, where a ramp is ending into a door. The standards say that the ramp should always have a landing before ending into a door. A ramp with slatted surface, a ramp without railings, a ramp which is very steep, almost as much as the width of the steps is the gradient of this ramp. So these are strictly no as per standards. Standards say that you have to have railing on both sides, no slatted surface, the ramp should have a landing before, and then there should be tactile markings. So none of these are followed in this set of ramps. A problem here where there is a accessible parking in the building and they marked it as a accessible parking bay with a wall signage, but there is no transfer bay next to these car parking slots. So even if a wheelchair user comes and parks his vehicle, there is no space between two adjacent vehicles to which is stated in the standard. So a transfer bay is a must. Walkways, where you could see that some of these walkways are with grass paver tiles or these interlocking paver blocks, which are good for vehicular movement. And then there are these curbstones, but they do not merge with the adjacent road level. So there has to be a curb ramp design, which is missing in this picture. There are drainage gratings along the walkways. So these drainage gratings also are something which should be perpendicular to the direction of movement. And then the space between the grating bars. The standards go as deep as mentioning what should be the space between the two grating bars, which should not exceed 12 mm, so that a wheelchair's caster or somebody's walking stick or a white cane is not stuck. That apart, talking of universal design, many people walk with stilettos and pencil heels. So those kind of footwear can also be caught if the gratings are not designed well. Now, this is an example where tactile pavers have been done and they are ending into a manhole or they are ending into a tree without taking into account the warning tile which should be present here. So these are some examples of badly done pathways. Looking at some examples where staircases have been done, standards say that the staircase has to have railing on both sides and it should be continuous along landings. It should start and extend from the first riser by 300 mm, which is missing in this picture here. A railing which is very low. Example of a staircase where one could trip because the risers are all open. So standards say that no open risers. All these pictures are highlighting those issues. These are examples of doors where I spoke about door handles, which need to be D-type or a lever kind of a handle. These drum locks where a person is required to use or twist their arms or wrist are completely a no-no as far as accessibility standards are concerned. Example of a glass door, which is automatic glass door, but it's without a manifestation. So a person with low vision can bang against these glass doors. So manifestations are missing. Examples of toilets. So here, you could see that standards also have specified that there have to be grab rails or grab bars done. This is an example where a toilet seat has a, just a kind of a stick which has been used as a grab rail. There is no transfer space next to the WC and the wash basin in this case. In this case, there is a nice hand wash, but then it's kind of restricted because it doesn't give a requisite knee space underneath. So even though there is an automatic tab, there is a wash basin, one can't access because the knee space is missing in this case. A lot of cafeterias that we've come across where counters are high, where you have these tables which have footrest, which will come in the way of toe space for a wheelchair user. Examples where there is a hand wash area and there is a raised platform underneath. There is a drop in granite. So again, cutting down on the toe space and knee space, which is required. All the accessories in the hand wash area are mounted very, very high in this case, and also obstructed by a dustbin. Likewise, you could see there is a picture of vending machines, and products also can be accessible. So vending machine these days, some of them are with touchpad kind of a mechanism. So a blind person will find it difficult to use. And then they are mounted high. So even a person on wheelchair or a short person will find them difficult to use. There are problems in these workspaces where one could see that printers are kept very high. They go beyond 1200 mm. These talking stations or internet stations or telephone booths are designed for standing people. Whiteboards are obstructed by some kind of storage underneath. This was an interesting office where they had the manager seated 2 steps above to keep an eye on the team members, forgetting the fact that the manager himself or herself could be a wheelchair user or a person with mobility impairment. So these steps should not be there, and this could have been catered well with universal design applied. Examples of signage where signage is like, for a female toilet, it's written as gals. So it's a slang. It does not have a pictogram. That apart, the mounting height, the color combination, the surface, which is very shiny, everything is wrong about this signage. Signage which is in form of a film on the glass door. It is not tactile. It does not have braille. It does not have color contrast. So signage, when it comes, we talk about signage, there is a system and there is a way of installing room signage, which has to be always next to the door on the handle side, 50 mm away at the level which is ranging from 1000 to 1500 mm. And it should be good color contrast. It should have braille. It should have raised letters. Evacuation plans that we see in the building. In this case, it is blocked by a planter. And that apart, it does not have information which is in tactile format, so that people with vision impairment can also benefit from it. A lot of issues with emergency related features in buildings where emergency exit is blocked by bricks. There are steps, so a person from ground floor can not independently exit this building. Emergency exits leading into basement and then blocked by a lot of storage underneath. Fire extinguisher, which is used as a door stopper in this building. Fire extinguishers also have to be mounted at accessible heights. It is best to have them in niches, which is missing in this case. And then a lot of lack of visual strobes, exits which are marked with a signage just above the door, and you can see an arrow. So it can be misleading, and people with intellectual disabilities may find it difficult to understand such signage. So these were few bad examples. Now what I'm going to show are few case studies. Some of these, in fact, all of these are our projects where on ground, how do we take and implement standards, accessibility standards. So here is an image of a reception counter before and after. So earlier it was meant for a standing individual only. There is a glass door. It did not have high contrast film. which has been mounted now at 3 levels as per the standards, and it's in good contrast. If a wheelchair user approaches this counter, he or she will have a good knee space to interact and sign documents. Even from the other side, if the receptionist herself or himself is a wheelchair user, there is knee space available and it's partially low. Likewise, then there is this staircase where initially there were no anti-skid nosing strips, there were no high contrast photoluminescent strips, there were no tactile indicators. All that has been implemented now, and the staircase has been retrofitted to take care in the accessibility standards into account. Pathways with railings on both sides, tactile indicators. Railings are at 2 levels. So the standards say that railings have to be installed at 950 and a lower level railing at 750 mm. There is a range. Again, the lower level railing is meant for short people, for children, for dwarf, because dwarfism is now a recognized disability among 21 disabilities. This lower level railing would cater to them as well. This building had only split levels. So the entire building, it's now a heritage building in New Delhi, where there was no way to install a lift. There was no way to reach the higher levels. So a platform lift or an inclined lifting platform has been done to cater to all the levels within the building. This is an example of a lap counter where knee depth has been created. The height of all the shelves has been designed, taking into account the forward reach from wheelchairs. Even the switchboards, the way they have been mounted, has been designed taking into account the anthropometrics and standards. This is an example of high contrast film in an automatic glass door. How do we highlight the glass door for people with vision impairment or low vision? How do they discern the presence of a glazing and a glass door using these high contrast manifestations? And an example of a signage which has raised letters, which has braille, which is mounted next to the door 50 mm away from the door frame or the handle side of the door. And then it has good color contrast as well. A few other examples of staircases. So railings are running all along this staircase, where railings are continuous along the landings. There are tactile markings. Then, there is something very interesting on the handrails, which is with braille and raised letters, which can be used by people with vision impairment to know what floor they have reached. In a reception lobby in a campus, these tactile markings have been done. The counter has been retrofitted to 2 levels to cater to people with disabilities. Fire-related features where we ask for visual strobes to be installed. These are visual alarms, not just auditory alarms, but visual alarms, alarming people or warning people of an emergency. These are used by deaf people or the hearing impaired people to know that there is an emergency. Examples of an emergency evacuation plan, which has information in braille and tactile format as well. Then this is an example of an evac chair, which is used to evacuate in a case of assisted evacuation when required. So very easily a person can sit on this chair and they can be evacuated from higher levels as well. Examples of unisex accessible toilet. So this is exactly how a washroom should look like, a type B corner toilet, which is stated in the standards, what kind of grab rails, where they have to be located, what kind of door is to be mounted, what kind of wash basin and a WC, the height of mirror, everything should comply to standards. Examples of few other doors, signage here, which is present with international symbol of accessibility in good color contrast. Presence of, this glass door. There are tactile markings on the floor, which indicate that there is a door now. Few other examples of our works where staircases have been retrofitted, lobbies have been retrofitted, walkways have been retrofitted. Examples of, how door vision panel should be. So very interestingly, all these fire doors have vision panels which are mounted, which are standard 300 by 300 size. and they are located at the eye level of a standing person, whereas as per standards they need to be low. And this door is an example of that. Examples of hygiene stations or hand wash areas, examples. So this is a factory scenario where they had some eye wash and a emergency shower, which is also now catering to people with disabilities. The heights have been designed, or the controls have been designed to cater to heights of people with disabilities. So now, sorry. So now I will touch upon the areas of our works. I represent DIOC, and Rama and I form a team. Rama being a disability expert, and I coming with experience in architecture, more than 20 years in architecture, out of which almost close to 15 years has been into accessibility. The areas of our works are access audits, design appraisals, and also implementation consultancy. Something which Mr. V. Suresh was touching upon this morning, that what are the roadblocks, why do we not see these standards implemented? Clearly because there are people who are not even aware of the issues with their buildings. So access audits come in handy. It's like a first test where we go and map our existing building and map it against standards to see where we are vis-a-vis standards. And here again, it's purely standards and not our own imagination or our own experience level which counts. We look at design appraisals. So something which is there in the law now, that any new building which is coming up will not be given a completion certificate or an occupation certificate till they comply with standards. So design appraisals or blueprint audits come in handy there. And then implementation consultancy is what we do now, where we bring about changes, or all the recommendations that are part of our access audit reports are translated into black and white drawings and then further implemented on site using the correct specifications, using the right approach to implement the changes. So when we talk about access audit, I'll just take you through a brief process. They are jumping for some reason. So the process of access audit is it starts with an on-site survey. First, we float a questionnaire to our clients, which is just kind of data collection exercise where we understand what is the building like, who are the occupants, how old is the building, what is the function, how many visitors come. Post that, we look at an on-site survey where we go to the site and take all the measurements, understand what the building is like. After which we look at, I'm sorry, there's some glitch that my slides are jumping. After that comes the backend work where we generate these reports. And these reports comprise of not just the observations, but also recommendations. And of course, the images which verify the findings. So in this particular case, you can see that the observation column says that there are no reserve car parks. And then the recommendation is how many reserve car parks have to be created, where they have to be created, and what kind of standards they need to meet. The other area of our work is design appraisals. So where drawings from other architects come to us when a building is being designed. This washroom is a washroom in blueprint, and we look at it in totality, map it again to the standards. Here in this case, we realize that there are a lot of issues vis-a-vis the layout, vis-a-vis the height and placement of grab bars, the height of mirror, the height of wash basins. There is an absence of a foldable grab bar. So all these things are analyzed deeply into a plan, and a report is sent to our clients to tell them what the issues are. Because if this washroom is constructed, what would be the challenges that they will see. So this is part of our design appraisal consultancy. The other part is implementation, where we get and we wear a designer's hat and we work out a master plan and we tell the clients that these are the changes that you need to bring about in your infrastructure. What are the ways in which these can be achieved, like a blueprint we create or a strategy exercise for the clients. We then generate these images. So as I speak, this project has already been completed in New Delhi, where we give the client what would be the before and after of implementation. This is an emergency exit door, how we've catered through with ramp, we've added railings, we've added tactile indicators. So all that the clients visualize with us through these 3D views and models, which is what is evident here. This work has already been accomplished by us, how an accessible workspace will look like. All these are given as suggestions and recommendations in form of drawings and renderings. This is an old building in New Delhi where we'll install a lift to make the upper level also accessible, a parking space, an accessible parking space, how space has been carved out for it, how tactile marking will go along this building. All that has been given to clients in form of these renderings. And now I would again pass on the presentation to Rama to talk more about our services. Rama?
Yeah, I think you've covered quite extensively. We work with a lot of corporates, government, non-government, international. Now I think we will open it up for questions, because we have about 15 minutes to take up any questions that people may have.
I will take up these questions and post it to you, Rama and Ruchira. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So before we move on to the question answer, so I would like to show you one small demo of how disabled people are evacuated of the building. So it's just a 2 minutes video. Who is a supporter of this webinar also. They're based out of UK, and these products are available in India. I'll just run through this.
Okay.
Living has changed. The world we live in has changed. And though we can't control the actions of others or prevent every incident, we can implement certain safety measures that could save lives should an emergency situation arise. The evac chair, the world's #1 emergency stairwell evacuation chair. In the event of an emergency, those that are mobility impaired or injured will need assistance. As the lifts will be out of use, the evac chair will help with the quick and safe evacuation of people. Under heightened anxiety and exertion, depending on the level of the emergency, it could be almost anyone that requires evacuating. evac chair is an essential safety provision for any building with stairs, no matter how big or small. The evac chair comes with a head support and a whole host of accessories. There are a wide range of chairs on offer. A chair for every kind of building and evacuation. Like schools or hospitals, with progressive horizontal evacuations. And airports, with phased or staged evacuations. The evac chair range tackles a wide variety of stairwells. The evac chair 600 and Arbex can even do an ascending evacuation. People all over the world have used the evac chair. People like John Abruzzo, who was safely evacuated from the 69th floor of the World Trade Center on 9/11.
The first plane hit the tower that day. John, like others, rushed to the stairwell. However, evacuation for John Abruzzo would prove much more difficult. How do you get a man who lives in a wheelchair down 69 floors? Evac chairs, stairway evacuation chair. They are put on every floor. The implementation of the products proved successful on 9/11. John Abruzzo did make it out of the building on 9/11 because of the evac chair.
Almost every building has a fire extinguisher. We consider the evac chair just as important. From something as simple as a broken lift to an emergency situation. The evac chair is the perfect solution for a stairway descent. In the world we now live in, anything is possible. The evac chair ensures a safe evacuation for those that need it should any kind of emergency arise, and could very well save lives.
Yeah, that's something interesting video that I wanted to show you. I will, let's move on to the questions. I was expecting Mr. Suresh also to join. I think he must be joining so that he can take questions on other parts of this NBC. So I'll start. I don't know whether Rama can answer these questions or Ruchira can answer. The question from Ashish Tiwari. He's asking, NBC Part 4 requires 25 to 30 PA force for pressurized area like lift lobby, which is higher than Part 3. How that need to be addressed? So do you have any answer to this, Rama?
No, I would not have, because that is maybe a lift.
Okay, I will definitely come back to you on this. There are, though, we have some participants like...
But there are these fire lifts that are now, required. Fire lifts are required for high-rise building in NBC, which also acts like, so that is something that is required.
That's what a fire tower, fire lift tower. But we have participants who are capable, but I'll try to answer this maybe at the end if Mr. Suresh joins. I'll move on to the next question from Chittaranjan Ka. It is sad story for India where ministers visits abroad so frequently, but they have never ever thought of such facility for differently abled people. Do you think by end of June 2022, all compliance will be met with by building owners or integrated by building users? If not, what penalty will be leveled and at what tune?
Okay, so yes, the deadline is very clear. There are disability commissioners at the chief commissioner level at the central and the state commissioner for every state. They are responsible for, enforcing the Disability Act. And some of the commissioners I know already are very serious. I remember one of the taxi aggregators who cancelled, this person was in Chennai, a wheelchair user. He booked a taxi and the taxi guy said, I cannot keep the wheelchair on the dicky, and he cancelled it. And this person actually missed the flight because of that. And he filed a complaint with the commissioner, and the taxi people have been asked to pay 5 lakhs of, penalty and all that. And there was one other case where aircraft had refused to take a person. So people have started using, the act quite well. There is still lack of awareness, but awareness is increasing. But I think the commissioner will play a very crucial role, and there's a disability movement. There are people with disabilities who are playing the watchdog role. So tomorrow, if I see a building just come up and it is not accessible, any one of us now that we are aware of these things, what stops us from writing to the commissioner saying we saw this building, click a photograph and say that it is not, and then certainly a notice or a letter will go in the first place to adhere to make the changes. If not, there will be penalties imposed.
Yeah, that's quite interesting that some of the commissioners started enforcing.
Yes.
I could see one in Goa, at least from the fire department, they insist while doing the fire drill, they insist that the building where the lift says do not use elevator. So he insists that you should have a evacuation chair next to the lift. So Goa,
just imagine this, yeah. You know, when they didn't even have a single evacuation chair. And it was raised by an employee with disability when doing the fire evacuation. So it was a mock drill. So this person with disability asked the, the security guard who was the police, the fire people who are doing the evacuation, saying, how are you going to evacuate me? And the person did not have any answer. He said, what will happen? No, it's a mock drill, so you don't participate. But he said, what if it's a real scenario? He said, we would lift you. Why should you lift a person like that? So that is when I think the whole importance came up, because the individual with disabilities said, how are you going to ask? And people with disabilities have started questioning also.
That's interesting. And Goa has taken the lead. I'm sure that state, while doing the fire drill, they also show how the disabled people can also be evacuated. So moving on to Monish Gulati's question, beside wheelchairs, which all aids have been considered while suggesting standard for NBC? Are there standard for the aids which are used by PWD? Can you share universal standard for public transport, particularly buses and metros?
So apart from wheelchair is just one assistive device. There are thousands of assistive devices. Within wheelchair also, there is a range from a motorized to a manual wheelchair, to crutches, to sticks, to artificial limbs that people use, calipers. So there is that, range when it comes to even mobility disability, and each disability has a range of assistive devices that, people with disabilities use. Yes, ISO and NBC have taken into account a wide range of, assistive devices while looking at the anthropometrics, they have taken into account. What was that question? Something else was there. Yeah. Buses. Yes. Buses have a code now. Buses, there is a code called bus standards available. So buses have a code. Standard.
Yeah, moving on to Sudhanshu Mulgal. In the code, it is mentioned that the door opening force required 20 N. But in a case of fire, the stairwells pressurized where the minimum required force for door opening is 50 N. How does a person with disability cope up with this if the assistance is not available?
Ruchira, do you want to answer this?
The only exemption to this 20 Newton is for these fire doors, which are heavy to operate. While, force is just one aspect, there are quite a few other things which need to be taken into account. The direction in which the door swing is, the direction in which the door is opening, the clear width of the door as well, the vision panel as well. All these play a crucial role, and force is just one aspect. While, also what we recommend is preparing a personalized emergency evacuation plan, or a PEEP, where, one can choose how they would be evacuated in case of an emergency. And all these aspects could be discussed as a individualized accommodation during that stage. So fire doors are exempt. If there is no assistance available, Rama, what do you think would be a way to?
See, I think what you mentioned is PEEP. So it is not that is why preparedness is very crucial for emergency. We are not looking at it at that point. So what we do is that when, somebody, for example, when a person joins a job where you're aware that this person is going to be there, we work out a PEEP which is personalized emergency. At that time, we'll test out. If it is going to be heavy, then in consultation with the person, we'll look at what is the best method for the person to be evacuated. If assistance is required, then who will give the assistance, plan A, plan B. So all that is worked out for a person, with disability. Some people would need assistance, but then you need to be prepared, and assistance should be prepared on how of it. So those are all part of planning that happens. It is not expected that everybody will evacuate independently. No, that is the aim. But some people will need assistance, and those assistance should be provided. Hello? Hello?
Sorry, I was on mute. Moving on to Sudhanshu's module. So please suggest some measures to assist people with disability in case of a large event in open area. Open area, yeah.
Ruchira, you want to take it up?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yes, one important aspect of accessibility is that we cater to individual needs and do not compromise on the safety, dignity, and independence aspect. So talking about a large open arena, I'm assuming it's a open air theater kind of a place that you are talking about. So, in organizing such an event, the first thing you should do is get a quick walk and talk audit or assessment of this area and see where the gaps are. There are a whole bunch of standards here, right from, if there is an event which is ticketed, how do we have a ticketing counter? How do people move to the arena itself? If there are participants, how do they get to the stage? Are there enough ramps available? Are there places? So standards are talking that a open air theater or an arena should have spaces for wheelchairs, and there are sizes, so that if I'm getting a companion, I'm part of the audience and I'm not forced to be just there, in the front row. I can choose and have a flexibility to be seated wherever I like, maybe in the center or the rear part of the open air theater or in the front, and yet be close to my companion. So how do we design that kind of seating? People who will require support, getting onto that open air theater levels, are there enough railings and handrails present? At what height are they? Do we have anti-skid nosing strips available? Do we have some kind of tactile indicators which will lead the person to their respective seating space? Are there tactile indicators to indicate level difference? So all these will part, and of course, what kind of lighting is available. If the event is happening in the evening, what lighting is available? So for an event scenario, do we have lighting happening on the stage, and do we have sign language interpreters as well? Some people who are deaf also lip read. So will there be lighting on the speaker's face? All these things will play a crucial role in making an event accessible. So these are few things that I can broadly think of as far as built environment is concerned, and making an event in a large open arena accessible to people with disabilities.
So thank you.
Right from the communication. Yeah, right. See, event is a very important aspect, and I'm glad you raised it. Like Ruchira said, built environment is one, but right from the invitation that you're doing, you are inviting people with, so that it's open to people with disabilities, and people with disabilities can reach out, in case they need any support. So from that stage to ensuring the built environment, ensuring the programming is accessible, to feedback, to all the side, things that may be available, like stalls, and all that can be very easily catered to, if you get somebody to assess and assist. You can create a fully inclusive event, and that will not just it will attract. There is a 15% population which has disability now, aging population. You will in fact it's a business case for events to become inclusive. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ruchira and Rama. I'll go on to the next questions from Manimaran. Can evacuation chair be substituted for the staircase of existing building which is not compliant to accessibility standard?
No, it
No.
cannot be. Yeah, no. See, evacuation chairs' purpose is to climb down, and of course, there is some which are climbing up, but that's very that is cumbersome. But there are now climbers, stair climbers, wheelchairs, and stair climbers. But that is help. You need to have what is either the lift or what Ruchira had talked about, a platform lift which will move up the staircase. These are the options to have, and not evacuation chair is for emergency purpose only.
Thank you. I have Mr. Namashivai, my friend, is also as a participant. I just, welcome him to talk about. I don't know whether he can attempt to answer this question on NBC Part 4, sir. Sir, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah,
Namashivai?
Yeah.
So the question is, he says in Part 4 require 25 to 30 force for pressurized area in like a lift lobby, which is higher than Part 3. So how do we address this?
See, the pressurization is the common requirement for all the occupants in case of emergency evacuation, number one. Number two, for these differently abled people, they have given the 20 Pascals. That is that is not matching with the actual requirement. But universal design cannot be done in this aspect because it is a common pressurization that the prevention of smoke is much more important. And moreover, what I suggest is in this case, they have talked also, the faculties talked about the assisted evacuation. So we have to go by the assisted evacuation only. Normally, when evacuation takes place, not only the disabled people will go, along with the other people also will go. Normally, the disabled people should go with assisted evacuation only. So in this case, they can help in this way only. So we cannot reduce the pressurization there in case of pressurization situations. So that is not viable by all. So the universal design cannot be done in this case. This is my view. So the assisted evacuation is the only ideal solution for them. That's my view.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Namashivayam, to address this issue or these questions. So I will move on. There are a few more questions. I'll just take it up. Sudhanshu's Murgal is asking, what are the basic features of a disabled refuge in a high-rise building in case of people are to be accommodated in disabled refuge for longer time?
Ruchira, you want to take it up?
You want?
So, one would be if they are seated there for a longer time, definitely you should provision accessible seating. A seating arrangement should be provided so that while they are waiting for assistance, they can be comfortably seated. Again, complying with the standards with a backrest, with an armrest. The refuge area should also have a two-way communication system. When we talk about two-way communication system, everyone should be able to use it, including deaf people. So a video kind of a phone or a chat facility to call for help, that should be provided in the refuge area as well. And of course,
as per which standard, Ruchira? That is as per which standard that you're talking?
So the part 4 of NBC, because largely whatever is covered for emergency related is either in the harmonized guidelines, which are laid by the Ministry of Urban Development. So there is one section in this harmonized guidelines, which you could go to and refer these standards. These are freely available if you Google and say harmonized guidelines by Ministry of Urban Development. You will see these standards there. So what I'm quoting is from there, and in the latest NBC, there is only a cross-referencing which is happening to the part 4 of Annexure B. So I can think of two things. One is seating, one is two-way communication system, signage, which should be in an accessible format. A lot of
Even
times,
access to refuge areas, because sometimes there's a step to reaching the refuge area.
right. I was coming to that. So,
Okay.
even getting to the refuge area, because what happens is that refuge areas in buildings are located at intermittent floors, and sometimes there are doors which are with a step up, without a landing, without a ramp to get onto the refuge area. So those have to be carefully planned. Of course, a refuge area door which should have a vision panel, which should take into account the heights of people who would be approaching it sitting on a wheelchair or a short stature person. So these are few things which will make a refuge area accessible.
Oh, thank you, Ruchira. And, there's a Chittaranjan complimenting, that's a great job. And penalty was hoping one, glad to know, so which means people are, complimenting that government is, or the commissioner is now enforcing the strict guidelines by that. And Santosh Devarajan, while complimenting, thank you, Rama and Ruchira, for the amazing presentation, lots of new things, and it was super extensive. So he has two questions. The first question is, what is the international and national policy makers advice on usage of the term differently abled vis-a-vis disabled? A quick Google search on says the public opinion looks divided on this. I'll repeat the question.
Yeah, I understood.
Mm-hmm.
No, differently abled is a no. It's 100% no as far as disability community is concerned, nationally and internationally. Differently abled, everyone is different. So people with disabilities are as different or as the same as anybody else. So they don't like to be called as any different. Disabled, like I mentioned in my presentation, that disabled is not a negative term. Disabled by the environment, by the society, the word disabled tells that there is a problem, but it lies outside the person. Because of the staircase, because of all the barriers that exist, a person is disabled. So disabled is not a negative term. Differently abled is considered patronizing or differentiating somebody. Every person is different, and so are people with disability, or every person at certain level are even the same, so is people with disabilities.
His second question, could you share any use case of leveraging technology in implementing universal design towards creating inclusive mobility?
Yeah. Now technology is coming big time, in the integrating into the building systems in some sense. So yes, the GPS software has become very accessible for people to navigate through spaces, for example. Similarly, even lifts today, because of this COVID thing, that they're going to be having apps to access the buttons. But it's a different problem that even technologies have accessibility issues if they've not been designed in an accessible manner. Now you have kiosks for, making payments. There are so many things that are being used in technology. And again, those have to be made accessible in terms of how it is used, at what height are these controls are, if they are accessible for people with vision disabilities. And technology can be very beneficial, but if it is, again, made accessible.
Thank you, Rima. The question from Sunil Kumar Tripathi. For underground metro station, which type of evacuation to be done for disabled? Yes, disabled, especially blind and hearing impaired people.
For an underground station, see, as far as blind is concerned, yes, you need to have tactile evacuation map to those tactile blocks that are there, handrails on the staircases, and also braille on the handrail, giving information where the exit is. And most importantly, doing some of these mock drills that people are trained how to help people with disabilities. The security guards need to be trained, a whole lot of range. When it comes to deaf people, visual strobes, for example, because hooters are not visible, signages where to exit, maps that are very clear. And for people with mobility impairment, the evacuation chair that moves up. These are some of the things that can be used for underground metro station. And even voice announcements, there are not just voice announcements, there are also these, information that can be flashed for people who may not be able to hear. Some of these can be added.
Thank you, Rama. Here, probably the last question. So, Naveen Pal, probably from the hotel industry, is asking, how can we ensure a safe stay of deaf and dumb people staying alone in a hotel room? What extra arrangement is required to do?
Yeah, it's a very important question because a lot of deaf people face a lot of problem when they come to hotels. When people come to hotels, and the reason one pays money is for the service that you can have. And for deaf people who go to these even five-star hotels don't get the service that they need, because how do they call up housekeeping? How do they call up, room service or even emergency for that matter? And so the word deaf, dumb should not be used. That's considered derogatory. Just deaf people is fine. So for emergency, what you need to do are two things. One is definitely a visual strobes. There are also vibrators that are available, vibrating this thing which they can keep it under the pillow. So these can be connected to the hooter system. And of course, signage. If there is a method of sending an SMS or a WhatsApp, also adds up. So some of these have to be done, and adequate signage so the person does not have to ask where the exit is. It is very clear that you can go where the exit is and reach out. And also an evacuation map at the back of the door or somewhere that also aids in evacuation.
Okay, thank you, Ruma. I'll take the last question. We're almost reaching 1 o'clock. So the question from Ashok Galpatil. Which agency in India verifies and enforces on compliance to these requirements? I think you already said, so probably you can repeat once again.
So we are, as DEOC, Diversity and Equal Opportunity Center, DEOC. We have a website. I can put it up on the chat, www.deoc.in. We are one of the empaneled access auditors. Definitely, right now, the government themselves do not have auditors. So we are kind of auditors who can, there is no certification as such for, the disability accessibility. However, we can do an audit based on the standards. That is the first level. And when in 2022, people will come and do an audit, when government will come and do an audit, at least you're very well prepared. And some of us who have been able to design many of these standards and all that, if you have done the audit, 99% you would meet all the standards. So right now you'll have to get an audit done from a private auditor like us.
Okay, that's a website of doc.in. So you can, anybody wants to interact with Rama Ruchira, so probably you can go there. And I can also connect with them. If you can email me, I can do that. So with this, we would like to conclude the session.
Dominic,
yeah.
Dominic?
Yes, sir.
One point I want to add with reference to the refuge area requirement for the differently abled persons.
Oh, please, sir.
Yeah, that is specifically Part 4 NBC Annex E. There is a specific mention is that the refuge area should contain 0.9 square meter area for the wheelchair person. And this number should be increased by 200 persons for one wheelchair space for 200 persons. Like this, it should be increased to go. This is specific mention is there. Just want to inform you. Thank you.
The door width, right?
Yeah. That's area also, not only door
area.
Width, area of accommodating the wheelchair in the refuge area.
Yes.
Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you, sir. Wonderful, lovely to have you. As I said, normally we get a very good response for most of the webinar. I think we need to create more and more awareness, and we need to continue to do such webinar where the knowledge is shared. So people think when it comes mobility impaired, people say it doesn't belong to me and I don't need to know. But it's very necessary that a physically fit person or the authorities or the consultant need to know these new standards. And also Rama was saying by 2022 every building need to comply with these codes. So this is just a beginning from my side, from Blue and Gray. We would like to continue to do the standards and codes on this, and we will come back soon with specific, probably the weekdays we may do this. I'm very thankful to Rama who initiated this webinar to be conducted. And I want to thank Mr. Namashivayam, who is also the fire advisor and the fire auditor and exceptional fire officer who fought a lot of fire in Tamil Nadu. I have a high regards for him, and also coming in, joining at the question ask session and sharing his experience. And thank you all the participants for joining. And I will take up your question through the mail and pass it on to them and answer to your queries. So we look forward to continue your support, and we look forward for your future participation also. I once again thank Ruchira and thank Rama for coming and joining for this webinar. Thank you. All the best. Stay safe. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Namashwaram, sir.
Thank you, everyone.